Hello, this is Dave Sugarbaker, and today is the 28th day of June, 2026. And I'm going to talk about continuing Revelation today. I have a couple of readings from Matthew and John. First from Matthew. As he walked by the Sea of Galilee, he saw two brothers, Simon, who is called Peter, and Andrew, his brother, casting a net into the sea, for they were fishermen. And he said to them, "Follow me, and I will make you fish for people." He said to them, immediately they left their nets and followed him. And as he went from there, he saw two other brothers, James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John, in the boat with their father Zebedee, mending their nets. And he called them. Immediately they left the boat and their father and followed him. That's from Matthew. From John. And as he, John the Baptist, watched Jesus walk by, he exclaimed, "Look, there is the Lamb of God." The two disciples who heard him say this followed Jesus. When Jesus turned and saw them following, he said to them, "What are you looking for?" And they said to him, "Rabbi," which means teacher, "where are you staying?" He said to them, "Come and see." They came and saw where he was staying, and they remained with him that day. It was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. One of the two who heard John speak and followed him was Andrew, Simon Peter's brother. He first found his brother Simon and said to him, "We have found the Messiah," which is translated the Anointed One. He brought Simon to Jesus, who looked at him and said, "You are Simon, son of John. You are to be called Cephas," which means Peter or rock. That's the translation. So in the second instance, John the Baptist is talking to two of his disciples, of John the Baptist's disciples, as Jesus walks by. And John says, "That man there is the Messiah." And as a result of that statement, both of these disciples stopped following John and started following Jesus. One of the two changing their teacher was Andrew. And Andrew goes and gets his brother and invites him to come and check out this Jesus. Jesus, on laying eyes on Andrew's brother Simon, renames Simon Rock or Peter on the spot. But in another gospel, the Gospel of Mark, Jesus doesn't rename Simon until Simon answers Jesus' question, "Who do you say that I am?" And Simon says, "You are the Christ, the Son of God." And Jesus says, "From now on you will be called Peter, Petros," translated rock. "And on this rock, Petra, or foundation, I will build my church." Let's complicate this a little more. Read Genesis chapter 1. There's an order in which God creates the heavens and the earth and the seas and the dry land. All plants and animals are created, and then finally, human beings are created. But beginning with the 4th verse of the 2nd chapter of Genesis, the story of creation begins again. But this time, it's a different order of things. Human beings are created early and participate in naming all of the animals that God then populates the world with. Two different creation stories with different orders in which creation takes place. 1st and 2nd Samuel and 1st and 2nd Kings are two accounts of the period of transition of the Hebrews from nomadic life to a settled life in the Promised Land. In one of these accounts, Over and over again, it's describing how the Hebrews took over and wiped out every vestige of the Palestinian culture that existed in the area before the Hebrews moved in. And in the second description of how they all moved in, the Hebrews, they tell about tension between them and the old Palestinian culture, but neither side wiped out the other. They had to learn how to get along. If you're a biblical literalist, I'm shaking your cage a little bit. 2 or 3 stories about how Simon gets the name Peter. 2 different stories of creation. 2 different stories of entering the promised land. 4 Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, often agreeing on details of Jesus' life, but John goes in an entirely different direction. How can page 1 not agree with page 2? First, when I'm challenged about my view of the Bible, I'm glad to point out that it's my source book for learning about who Jesus is and what Jesus teaches us about God, and God is a God of love, particularly. Reading the Bible helps me to shape my beliefs about God, but the Bible is not what I believe in. I believe in God. I understand the Bible is a library of writings about God and about God's intentions and interactions with human beings over the span of perhaps 1,000 years, culminating with the life, teachings, trial, death, and resurrection of Jesus. In the early Old Testament, the people of Israel see God as God of the mountain, or God of the storm, or God of war. And as time goes on, the Hebrews refine and deepen their understanding of who and what God is. God's not changing, it's that people's understanding of God is evolving over time. By the time of Jesus, we have a radical redefinition of God. God is no longer king and judge. God is our loving parent, the waiting Father, who is continually looking out the window and down the road in case we, the prodigals, come to our senses and come home. There's some diversity in the 4 Gospels in terms of what's important or what the goal of each Gospel writer might be, but as much as the stories may diverge, they all come together to tell one story when it comes to the last week of Jesus' life, his arrest, trial, execution, burial, and resurrection. After each of the Gospel writers appears to be doing his own thing, suddenly at the end of all 4 Gospels, we find that what the biblical scholars call the Passion narrative. The Passion narrative in all 4 Gospels seems to come together when the writers are dealing with important things. By the time of the Last Supper, there's not much disagreement among the 4 Gospels. Who goes first to the empty tomb differs in the 4 Gospels, but at the core, all 4 Gospels are focusing on the fact that Jesus is alive again on Easter Sunday morning and interacting with his disciples. When it comes down to the core of faith, the differences begin to fall away. We have to remember that history, the way we know it, was not invented yet. When the Old and the New Testament were written, the writers tried to describe their experience of God, the Creator. They weren't talking history, they were talking faith. When we look with 20th century eyes and find discrepancies, it's not really the fault of the Bible. The fault is in how we perceive and approach the Bible. To get the most out of the Bible, it seems to me we have to see it as it is in its day and time and place. we need to understand the work that historians and linguists have done to place each book in the library, our Bible, in its historical setting. We have to understand the books of Moses, for instance, the first 5 books of the Old Testament. We have to understand that they are a document, the Torah, compiled by King David's scribes, bringing together various strands of Jewish tradition, so each tradition's stories are included. It's not pick one, discard the others. They're all in there. That's why we have 2 creation stories, one after another. Finally, we have to understand that God's not done with us yet. It would be a mistake to assume that God quit acting in our world by the 2nd century after the time of Christ, when all of the books of our present Old and New Testament were collected as our Bible. At Northbury Community Church, we had a 100-foot long stained glass window running the length of the side of the chapel, and it was called our torchbearer window. The theory was that in different times and places, individuals emerged who shed new light on the human condition under God. One of our torchbearers was Bishop Robinson, the spiritual leader of the Pilgrims at Plymouth. Bishop Robinson believed God continued to interact with humanity and continued to reveal more of his will and his love for us. The way he said it was, "More light shall yet dawn." I believe the Bible is our source book, not an object of worship. I believe God continues to be active in our world and that more light shall yet dawn. I firmly believe that God's not done with us yet. Theologians call that continuing revelation. Now, God bless you. I appreciate you taking the time to listen to this. I'm in my new office at First Presbyterian Church in Maysville, and they have an internet connection that's a lot faster than mine at home. Mine at home can take 4 or 5 hours to upload a sermon, and this is 15 minutes. So that's why I'm doing it here rather than at home as I have usually done. So I will upload it from here, and if you find value in it, I hope you'll pass it along. But in any case, thank you for your attention and your time, and I'll see you soon. Thanks. Bye-bye.